14 hours of driving. The tires of my truck crunched over the fresh snow as I pulled up to the limestone pillars of the Oak Haven chalet. I rolled down the window, letting the biting wind hit my face, and punched my code into the keypad. My birth year. The same code it had been since the day the foundation was poured. It blinked red. Access denied. I frowned and typed it again. Red. The intercom crackled to life. It wasn't my father's voice. It was a stranger. Professional. Detached. Miss Vance, the owner updated the security logs this morning. Your access code has been revoked. I stared at the speaker. I live here, I said, my voice flat. Not tonight, ma'am, the guard replied. The property is booked for a private event. No unlisted personnel permitted beyond the gate. Unlisted personnel. That was my new title. I looked up the winding driveway toward the warm, glowing windows of the mansion that my combat pay had built. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just put the truck in reverse. I wasn't coming home for Christmas. I was being locked out of my own investment. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I drove 2 miles down the road to a Motel 6 with a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying fly. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, a sharp contrast to the pine and cinnamon scent that I knew would be filling the hallways of Oak Haven right now. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and opened my laptop. Most people would have called their mother crying. They would have begged for an explanation. But the military had drilled that weakness out of me years ago. When you are under fire, you don't ask why the enemy is shooting. You secure your position and you return fire. I logged into the bank portal. I didn't waste energy on tears. I didn't waste time on confusion. I treated this like a perimeter breach. I sat down, opened my laptop, and went straight to the intel. I navigated to the Oak Haven operating account, and there it was. A digital flyer posted to the community page, the reason for the private event. It was a photo of me, in full dress blues, saluting the flag. Beneath it, in elegant gold script, it read, "The Vance Family Annual Support Our Troops Gala. Tickets, $2,500 per plate." I stared at the screen. My parents were just locking me out. They were selling tickets to my exclusion. They were using my face, my uniform, and my service to charm wealthy donors, all while banning the actual soldier from the premises, because I didn't fit the aesthetic of their cocktail party. I tried to feel heartbroken. I really did, but my training overrode the hurt. Emotion is a liability in a crisis. Data is the only thing that saves you. I clicked open a folder I hadn't touched in 5 years. It was labeled Project Bridge. To understand why I wasn't panicking, you have to understand who Richard Vance really is. To the neighbors, he is a successful real estate developer. To the banks, he is a liability. 5 years ago, Oak Haven was just a half-finished skeleton of wood and debt. Dad had over-leveraged himself on bad land deals, and the bank was threatening to seize the property before the roof was even on. He needed $420,000 to finish the build, but with a credit score starting with a 5, no one would touch him. Enter Caitlin, the dutiful daughter, the combat medic with a government-backed income, a pristine credit history, and a desperate need for approval. He had sat me down at the kitchen table, tears in his eyes, telling me this house was for us. It was the family legacy. He just needed a co-signer. Just a formality, he said, a technicality to clear the underwriters. I was 24. I signed. But I didn't just co-sign. I executed a commercial guarantee. I pledged my future pension and my savings as collateral to secure his dream. I sat back in the motel chair, the blue light of the screen illuminating the room. For 5 years, I had been the silent partner, the invisible investor who paid the property taxes when Dad was short and covered the insurance when Mom needed new curtains. They treated me like a silent ATM, necessary, functional, and easily ignored when the transaction was over. But they had forgotten one thing. Investors don't just give money. We expect returns. And if the management becomes incompetent, we have the right to liquidate the asset. I downloaded the original loan agreement and the deed. I wasn't a daughter tonight. I was the bank, and the bank was about to conduct an audit. I didn't close the laptop. Throwing it across the room would have been satisfying, but inefficient. I simply zoomed in. On the screen was a document titled Commercial Guarantee, dated 5 years ago. My signature was at the bottom, shaky and eager to please. But tonight I wasn't looking at the signature. I was looking at Clause 14, Section B. A cross-default and remedies clause. It was a paragraph written in dense legal jargon, the kind my father relied on people not reading. But in the military, you learn to read every line of a briefing, because the fine print is usually what gets you killed. It read, in the event of a single missed payment or borrower insolvency, the guarantor shall assume immediate executive power of attorney over the collateralized asset to mitigate financial loss. Translation: if Dad missed a payment, the house didn't belong to the bank yet. It belonged to the person who backed the loan. It belonged to me. I checked the payment history. September, late. October, missed. November, missed. He hadn't just banned me from Christmas. He was 3 months delinquent on the mortgage I was liable for. He was throwing a $2,500 a plate party inside a house that was technically in foreclosure, hoping the donations would cover his tracks before the bank called me. But I wanted to be sure. I needed to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was no love left to save. I picked up my phone and sent a single text to my father. I'm at the Motel 6. I drove 14 hours. Why is my code revoked? The 3 dots appeared immediately. He was holding his phone, probably checking ticket sales. His reply came through a minute later. It was casual, breezy, as if he were canceling a lunch date and not exiling his daughter. Kate, honey, the gala is high profile this year. Senator Higgins is here. It's strictly black tie. We thought it best you head back to base. The military thing, it makes people uncomfortable. We'll wire you a Christmas bonus next week. The military thing makes people uncomfortable. I stared at the words. The military thing was the steady paycheck that secured his loan. The military thing was the collateral that allowed him to break ground. Then a notification slid down from the top of my screen. Instagram. My mother had just posted a photo. I clicked it. It was a picture taken inside the Oak Haven ballroom 10 minutes ago. My brother, Caleb, was standing in a tuxedo, holding a flute of champagne, laughing with a group of donors. Caleb, who had dropped out of college twice. Caleb, who had never paid a bill in his life. The caption read, "So proud of our son Caleb, the rock of this family, a true leader." The air left my lungs. I thought about the sand in my boots. I thought about the birthdays I spent in a mess hall eating lukewarm spaghetti while they vacationed in Aspen. I thought about the check I sent home when the roof leaked, and the thank you card I never received. They didn't see me as a daughter. They didn't even see me as a person. To Richard and Susan Vance, I was an asset class. I was a bond that had matured. They had cashed me out, spent the liquidity, and now they were annoyed that the empty account was standing at their gate, asking to be let in. I set the phone down on the nightstand. The screen went dark. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger is hot. It's messy. What I felt was the cold, sterile hum of a machine coming online. They wanted a leader. They were about to meet one. I pulled up the contact information for a corporate attorney in the city. I wasn't going to reply to my father's text. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at the table. I was going to buy the table, and then I was going to evict everyone sitting at it. The next morning, I traded the smell of stale cigarettes for the scent of mahogany and expensive coffee. Mr. Sterling's office was on the 42nd floor, overlooking the city that was covered in the same snow falling on Oak Haven. Sterling was a corporate shark, the kind of lawyer who costs $100 an hour and didn't ask about your feelings. But even he looked uncomfortable as he read through the file I had compiled. He adjusted his glasses, looking from the bank statements to me. Miss Vance, he said, his voice low. This isn't just a missed payment. They are 90 days delinquent. The bank sent the notice of default to the property address 2 weeks ago. My father probably shredded it, I said calmly. He thinks if he doesn't acknowledge a debt, it doesn't exist. Sterling nodded slowly. Under the terms of the commercial guarantee, the acceleration clause is already triggered. You have full legal standing to execute the power of attorney immediately. We can seize the accounts, change the locks, and initiate eviction. He paused, tapping his pen on the desk. However, standard protocol suggests a courtesy notice, a 48-hour warning to allow the borrower to cure the default. Do you want to call him? I looked at the phone sitting on his desk. A part of me, the old Caitlin, the daughter who just wanted to be loved, screamed to pick it up, to call Dad and scream, to tell him I knew everything, to hear him panic, apologize, and promise to fix it. But I knew exactly how that call would go. He would gaslight me. He would tell me I was overreacting. He would say the check was in the mail. He would turn my anger into a debate. And by the end of the call, I would be the one apologizing for ruining his mood before the big party. I looked at Sterling. No, I said. No, he asked surprised. If I call him, I said, my voice steady. I give him time to hide assets. I give him time to spin a story to the donors. This is something most people don't understand about dealing with narcissists. They expect noise. They feed on your reaction. When you scream, they win, because they know they still have the power to unbalance you. They want the fight because the fight validates their importance. The most dangerous thing you can give a person like my father is absolutely nothing. I don't want a conversation, Mr. Sterling, I said, leaning forward. I want a tactical strike. My silence isn't a retreat. It's the sound of the gavel rising before it comes down. Sterling held my gaze for a long moment. Then, a small, terrifying smile touched his lips. He understood. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a hostile takeover. Very well, he said, opening his laptop. We skip the warning. I'll draft the notice of seizure and the writ of possession. We can serve them within 24 hours. Serve them tonight, I corrected. At the Gala. Sterling began typing, the clacking of the keys sounding like gunfire in the quiet office. I'll need the sheriff to enforce a civil standby if we're doing it during an event, he mumbled. I'll start the filing. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the snow fall. I imagined my mother at Oakhaven right now, probably yelling at the caterers, arranging the flowers, completely unaware that the ground beneath her feet had already been sold. I checked my phone. Another text from Tyler. Seriously, don't come. Dad is stressed enough. I didn't reply. I deleted the thread. Miss Vance? Sterling's voice cut through my thoughts. He had stopped typing. He was staring at the bank ledger again, his brow furrowed. What is it? I asked, turning around. I'm looking at the transaction history for the Gala ticket sales, he said, pulling up a new spreadsheet. You said this was a charity event? For Veterans Support United? That's what the flyer said, I nodded. Sterling turned the monitor toward me. Then why are all the ticket payments being routed to a private LLC registered to your brother? The room went dead silent. I walked over and looked at the screen. Vance Global Holdings LLC. Sole proprietor, Caleb Vance. That's not a charity, Sterling whispered. That's a shell company. My blood ran cold. Vance Global Holdings LLC. The name sat on the screen like a tumor. I leaned in, my reflection ghostly against the spreadsheet rows. Are you sure? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sterling clicked through the filing documents. Registered agent, Caleb Vance. Principal address, the Oakhaven Chalet. Purpose, consulting. He looked up, his face grim. Miss Vance, this isn't a charity. There is no 501c3 registration. Every dime from those $2,500 tickets is going directly into a private for-profit account. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights below looked like circuit boards. I had tried to understand why they treated me this way. Why did they take my money but reject my presence? Why was I the one who had to fix the roof, but Caleb was the one who got the toast at Christmas dinner? I used to think it was just favoritism. I used to think I just wasn't lovable enough. But standing there in Sterling's office, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It wasn't about love. It never had been. To a financial narcissist, a child isn't a human being. A child is an investment vehicle. I was the bond they had matured to build the house. Caleb was the speculative stock they were gambling on to bring them fame. They didn't hate me. You don't hate an ATM. You just get annoyed when it stops dispensing cash. And now they were doing the same thing to the donors. They were selling the idea of patriotism, the image of the soldier daughter, to fund their lifestyle. They're using my photo, I said quietly. On the flyer. They're using a service member's image to solicit funds for a fake veterans charity. Sterling nodded. That moves this beyond simple fraud. That's stolen valor. And since they are soliciting donations online across state lines, it's wire fraud. It's federal. He looked at the clock. The sheriff is ready. We have the writ of possession based on the default. But with this evidence, we aren't just serving an eviction notice. We are securing a crime scene. I picked up my coat. The heavy wool felt like armor. Do we call the police? Sterling asked. No, I said, buttoning the coat. We let the sheriff handle the eviction. We let the donors see the truth. And we let Caleb explain to Senator Higgins why his donation check is being seized as evidence. I checked my phone one last time. A text from Mom. Hope you're not sulking. We're having a wonderful time. Everyone is asking about you. We told them you're on a special mission. You have no idea, I whispered to the screen. The driveway to Oak Haven was lined with Bentleys and Mercedes. Valets were running back and forth, their breath steaming in the cold air. The house itself was ablaze with light, looking like a golden ship floating on a sea of snow. My truck looked out of place as I pulled up behind the sheriff's cruiser. The security guard, the same one who had turned me away 24 hours ago, stepped out of the booth. He looked at the sheriff, then at me. He didn't ask for a code this time. He opened the gate. We drove up slowly. I could see the silhouette of the party through the massive bay windows. People laughing. Waiters passing trays. It was the picture of success my father had always desperate to project. I stepped out of the truck. I wasn't wearing my dress blues. I was wearing a black turtleneck and a dark coat, sharp and severe. Mr. Sterling walked beside me, clutching a leather portfolio. 2 deputies flanked us. We walked up the front steps. The heavy oak doors I had paid to refinish 3 years ago, were guarded by another private security team. They saw the sheriff and stepped aside. I pushed the doors open. The heat hit me first, then the smell of expensive perfume and roasted duck, then the sound of a string quartet playing Silent Night. We walked into the foyer. The chatter died down instantly, heads turned. Uniforms were a jarring contrast to the tuxedos and evening gowns. In the center of the ballroom, standing on a small riser, was my father. He was holding a microphone, a glass of champagne in his other hand. He looked flushed, happy, victorious. He saw me. For a second, his smile faltered. But Richard Vance is a master of spin. He quickly recovered, beaming at the crowd. And look, he announced, his voice booming. A surprise arrival. My daughter, home from the front lines just in time. A few people clapped politely. Caleb, standing near the bar, looked pale. He saw the sheriff. I offered no smile. I gave no wave. I walked straight to the riser. The crowd parted for the police like water. Dad, I said. Honey, he tried to side-hug me, to pull me into his performance. We were just talking about your sacrifice. I stepped back, leaving his arm hanging in the air. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. Hey, he whispered, his eyes flashing with warning. What are you doing? I turned to the room. The silence was absolute. My name is Caitlin Vance, I said, my voice clear and steady over the speakers. I am the guarantor of the mortgage on this property. I am the legal owner of the Oak Haven estate. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mom froze near the buffet table, dropping a silver tong. Effective immediately, I continued. Executive power of attorney has been exercised due to default. This property is now under my control. "Caitlin, stop this," Dad hissed, reaching for the mic. The sheriff stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Dad froze. I looked at the donors, the senator, the local business owners, the neighbors. "Furthermore," I said, locking eyes with Caleb, "the charity you are donating to tonight is not registered. It is a private shell company owned by Caleb Vance. Your donations are not going to veterans. They are going to the people standing on this stage." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts. The senator looked at his check, then at my father, his face turning red. "That's a lie," Caleb shouted, his voice cracking. "She's crazy. She has PTSD." "Mr. Sterling," I said calmly. Sterling stepped forward and held up the bank records. "We have the wire transfers, Caleb. It's over." I turned back to my father. He looked small, deflated. The illusion he had spent his life building had shattered in 60 seconds. "You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises," I said, handing the microphone back to him. "The sheriff will escort you out." I walked off the stage. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them fall. I just needed them gone. The exodus was quiet. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic fainting spells. Once the sheriff had secured the evidence from Caleb's laptop and the guests had driven away in a procession of red taillights, the house fell into a silence so deep it felt like the building itself was exhaling. I stood by the window in the living room. Outside, the snow was still falling, covering the tire tracks of the Bentleys and the sheriff's cruiser that had taken my brother away for questioning regarding the wire fraud. My parents left in their own car. Dad didn't look at me as he walked out the door. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched, stripped of the bravado that had armored him for decades. Mom had paused at the threshold, clutching her coat, looking at me with tear-filled eyes, not of apology, but of disbelief that I had actually followed through. "Where will we go?" she had whispered. "I don't know," I had answered, my voice soft but unyielding. "But you have each other, and you have your pride. That should be enough." The heavy oak door clicked shut. The lock engaged. I was alone. I walked through the empty ballroom. Half-drunk glasses of champagne sat on the tables. The Support Our Troops banner still hung crookedly from the ceiling. I reached up and tore it down. For the first time in 5 years, I walked up the grand staircase without feeling like a trespasser. I went into the master bedroom, the room my father had forbidden me from entering because my boots might scuff the floors. I opened the balcony doors and let the freezing winter air rush in, purging the smell of expensive perfume and deceit. I didn't feel triumphant. Revenge isn't sweet. It's just necessary. It's the surgical removal of a limb to save the body. It hurts, but it allows you to survive. I didn't keep Oakhaven as a trophy. A house built on a foundation of lies can never truly be a home, not for me. 6 months later, I renamed the property. It is no longer the Oakhaven Chalet. The sign out front now reads, "The Vance Sanctuary." It isn't a luxury resort for wealthy donors. It is a transitional housing facility for female veterans returning from deployment. Women who, like me, have carried the weight of the world on their shoulders, only to come home and find they have nowhere to rest. We have 12 residents now. We don't have galas. We don't have black tie dinners. But we have dinners where we cook together. We have nights where we sit by the fire, the same fireplace my father said was for show only, and we talk about the things we had to bury to survive. I walked over to that fireplace now, striking a match. The wood caught instantly, the orange flames dancing against the stone. For years I had begged for a seat at their table. I had paid for the wood, the food, and the chairs, hoping they would finally invite me to sit down. But I realized something tonight, watching the flames rise. You cannot negotiate your worth with people who profit from your insecurity. You cannot buy respect from people who are selling your silence. I didn't need their table. I never did. I had the strength to build my own. I sat down in the armchair, watching the snow fall outside. Warm, safe, and finally, truly home. If you believe that family is defined by loyalty and not just blood, hit that like button and share this story. And tell me in the comments, Would you have exposed them publicly or just taken the house quietly?